Good morning, everybody. How are you? Other than cold, and I will say that when the temperature in Virginia and the temperature in Boston kind of match up, you know that it's a little cold for somebody that grew up in the Deep South, but we're really pleased to be with you here today, and we're excited to be able to share our story. So, Ira, are we ready to roll?
We're ready to roll.
All right.
I think we're up and going.
We got it. So, I'm Pam, and I just say to folks, I'm just Pam, and this is Ira, and we're really excited to be here and share our story with you today because we've worked with a number of amazing educators across our school division as well as the United States and even beyond to help really build out a level of creativity unlike what you see in most public schools today, particularly in comprehensive schools. And one of the things I will tell you is that we are a place that really has worked hard to try to really figure out pathways to innovation for all students, not just some. So Ira?
She's Pam, and I'll describe the relationship, we both will later on, but I come to education from a sort of radically different set of circumstances. I guess Pam says I was born a creative, but really my family would say I was born a problem. And certainly educators who dealt with me all the way through grad school would agree with that. But so I come to education from a point of view of growing up in special education, in an alternative high school, and then pursuing a whole range of different things in my life. I was a studio art student, I was an architecture student, I was a New York City police officer for a bunch of years.
He's a little ADHD.
Yeah, a little bit. All of which I think taught me observation skills, which, you know, to us is a really, really critical point of view. Pam and I actually met on Twitter about 10 years ago.
It was not the personal relationship side of Twitter, it was the education side.
Right. And the first thing Pam said to me when we really started speaking over Skype, I was at Michigan State and she was in the Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia, is she said, I'm tired of having islands of excellence. Every student in our schools should have the ability to get all the opportunities we can offer. And the first week I walked schools with her in Albemarle County, I realized that we had some of the wealthiest children in the country, some of the poorest children in the country, over 80 languages spoken. You know, this Albemarle County is listed as one of in the top 3% of US counties in income inequality. So getting these opportunities to every student across 726 square miles was a real battle.
And I will tell you that, for me, one of the areas of focus that caused me to want Ira to come work with us in Albemarle County is that we had really hit what I called an S-curve plateau, where we had done some really amazing work over the prior decade, but really had sort of, in that S-curve, we had really flattened our growth. And so I was looking for ways to sort of recharge, reimagine, reinvent, and re-up an energy of educators around creative solutions to big challenges with young people. I will tell you that one of the things that had really struck me in some of my look at the private sector, and I was fortunate to be able to go to the Darden School of Business into an educational leadership, executive leadership program, and started to really look at some things beyond the world of education. And something that caught my attention was that in 1951, down in New Jersey, there was this little place called Bell Labs. And in 1951, at Bell Labs, they invented almost all of the technologies we have today with our phone systems, but they didn't always have the technology over the years following Bell Labs to be able to get to where we are today. They had to wait for the technology to catch up. But it struck me that the VP of Bell Labs walked in and said to a group of engineers, I want you to think about that if the phone system in the United States was blown up today, what would you build to replace it? And I started thinking about that in regards to education. I also was really taken with the concept, and I actually like this term better, and that is the term that came out of Lockheed in World War II when they were building out what they called their skunk works, which was How do you get a group of people together that are creatives and really design up things that we had not even imagined could be invented? And so I like to think of what we did in Albemarle, Ira, to some extent, is being able to really create a space where educators could be part of more of an educational Bell Labs or even a Skunk Works.
The belief was that we had to look beyond education, look into the world, and see every opportunity we had. And we're about to show you some stories where you'll hear kids in their own words, but one of the things that I remember is when the Apple store first opened on Fifth Avenue, New York, I went into that store. It was 2 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday morning from a Friday night, and it was completely filled. And everyone in there was doing something creative. They were writing novels or poetry, they were making videos, they were writing music, they were all these things. So if you walked in and were going to email somebody, you looked like this slacker sort of loser there. And what I realized is all these people were doing different things, but they were all creating and feeding off each other. And that's the concept of contagious creativity that we wanted all of our schools to pursue.
Now, I will tell you, as I was getting ready to put some videos in front of you that we think hopefully will push the envelope in some of your own thinking, that one of the things that we hear is we've been taking our story and the stories of all of the educators that we've worked with to help really create that sort of roadmap or journey to change inside our system, that we will hear in front of a group of educators who are maybe in a more economically advantaged setting in terms of their kids. We get the yeah buts. Well, yeah, that might work with the disadvantaged kids, but not for our kids. And then we go and we're in a space with disadvantaged children economically with that group of educators, and they'll say, well, you know, that might really work well with kids that have more resources and so forth, but not with our kids. And so what we've really loved is that we've had a great partnership over the years with the New York Hall of Science. And when they came to visit us, they said, you know what? You guys are the antidote to yeah, but, because you're really building this out across an entire system, 726 square miles, 26 schools, 14,000 students, from the yuppie puppies who are the children of the University of Virginia professors to kids that literally live in homes that sometimes don't even have running water and may even not have really good flooring in their homes. They're in our rural poverty areas. So we've tested this in rural areas, suburban areas, and urban areas. All right, Ira.
So, quick introduction. This is a very short video. This is what we call an urban ring elementary, partially serves a refugee center, lots of languages, lots of free lunch.
We've got about 81 languages spoken in our urban center.
This was a dream of mine going back a long way, but we worked together with a whole bunch of people to make it happen. So this is a classroom with 130 students, kindergarten through 5th grade, and 6 teachers. And this is what it sounds like, most importantly.
That might create a little dissonance for a few people in the audience.
Here's the thing about this space. We just picked kids to go in it the way they'd pick anybody. We asked parents they could opt out of it, but we didn't ask parents to check in. It was, in fact, sort of slightly overloaded with special needs and behavior issue children.
Children like you, Ira?
Children like me.
Ira used to, he does, I will do a little aside here. He tells people that when he was a kid in school, he used to look at the rules on the wall when he would walk into a classroom and go down it and go, well, you know, this is a menu for how to get to a different place.
Right, yeah. Wow, this will get me suspended for a week? Yes. The behavior problems vanished. The need for pull-out special services almost vanished. discipline disappeared. Parents said their kids had never had more one-to-one time with teachers. And ever since we built this space, we've had to keep knocking down walls in other parts of the building because parents now want this without question. And we've expanded it to a rural elementary and to another urban ring elementary to make it go.
But here's what's interesting. When this goes out with the architects that helped us design it up, the people that are most likely to want this for their kids are parents in independent schools, fascinatingly. Okay.
I will also say that these kids did fine on state tests. Sort of matched our wealthiest kids in achievement. Now, we take a different mode of this. You're about to see a collaboration between a passion-based learning high school and an intervention class in an elementary school.
In a warehouse that we converted into this little space for high school kids.
Right.
These birds are high up in the sky with their wings. They gracefully fly. These drones can fly until the battery dies. Then and they still fly. Birds. Learn about birds. See what they eat, even their feet. Fly drones high in the sky. It's so much fun, I can't fly. Birds. We look at birds. We make a bird project with Miss Corbett. We work together and make a plan. We write the facts and we look at tracks. We use game cameras and drones. When we help the environment, we're not alone. Educational
There you go,
talks.
right? It's everywhere.
Nature walks. Non-fiction books. Bird books.
Now, when you're the chief technology officer and one of your people comes to you and says, you need to give me $400 so I can join the Audubon Society because we're going to chase birds with drones and track what they're doing, it's a thing of saying, how do I do this and make this perfectly okay? And we'll get to that.
But we want you to think about the idea of kids coming together across a system, older kids, younger kids, and building a project that gets to all the things that we want for kids that are in intervention services who are not passing state tests, but takes them above the level of remediation. So next,
this is, you want to give a quick to the team 19.
all right, or is it start with Josh?
Yes.
Okay, so Boston claims Ted Dinnersmith, but Albemarle County does too because he actually has, he has farm there. So anyway, but before Most Likely to Succeed, the video that he produced hit the big time, he brought it to us in Albemarle, and it was still kind of in beta testing, and sent a link to us and said, hey, watch this. And I brought in a high school principal with a team who had been really trying to struggle with what do we do with ninth graders? And they'd been trying to figure out what do we do with kids that are likely to drop out so that we can really intervene, remediate, and try to keep them in school. After the principal and his team from his school watched that video, they said, we don't want to do remediation. We want to do what's in that movie for our ninth graders. And between May of that year, watching that video, and August when we reopened school, they built a school within a school for kids that were at risk of dropping out called Team 19, because that's the year they're going to graduate. And guess what? He's been quiet. This is the year. These kids are going to graduate. But we wanted to show you what this meant to one kid who was so close to dropping out. Even as a ninth grader, we were struggling to keep him in school. And he's going to talk about this in his first year there.
Honestly, school for me wasn't really good. I was struggling in many of my classes. I learned by seeing things and interacting with things. And without the support of interacting with things, it was pretty hard. Honestly, I thought I was going to be a fifth-year senior, and I really didn't want that.
We have a lot of ninth grade kids coming in that are disenchanted and having a hard time. And each year we know who those kids are, but we just only did a little bit better each year, making a difference.
So one of the tricks to this then was to say, how do we completely change the experience? And what we did was we picked 4 content area teachers who worked with 60 kids for half a day, every day, 5 days a week. Instead of double blocking anybody in language arts or math, we did that. They got 5 credits. They got their 4 core credits plus career tech credit for this block, and they had the other half of the day to take any elective they want, thus keeping them engaged in the school.
And the one caveat I said to the principal was, put these kids on something that looks different than a bell schedule. And so these teachers controlled their time, they controlled the way that they taught in an interdisciplinary way. They brought in resourcing that really upped the game for the kids. And the kids worked in a project-based, maker-focused format. And they've stayed together for 4 years. They've evolved the program every year to meet the needs of the kids as they move up. And so one of the things that we've got is we'll have our first year of graduates, but we now have 4 years of kids in that program, and it's spread to our other schools. But here's the thing I think is the most important part about it, and that is that we really believe in a belief system of rapid prototyping, that if someone comes to us with a great idea, we don't say, well, you know, it's not in the strategic plan. We never let a strategic plan get in the way of a great idea. And so when this emerged, we worked fast, we put it into play, and we've collected data over the 4 years to really watch as these kids have grown and developed. It's not always been easy for them, but we've got kids who are going to graduate from high school that otherwise might not have. All right, Ira, let's roll.
So, you know, we believe in technology are tools, but great tools do great things for kids. One of the things, you know, we aimed at an idea that by the end of 5th grade, most of our kids should be bored programming with Scratch. Not that they could do it, but they'd be bored with it and would want to pursue other things. And the wonder of Scratch is that we could take any 5-year-old, and we'll talk about this a bit later, and have them understand the full number line and negative integers, as well as slope-intercept, in about 2 days.
So they're doing work that oftentimes we find challenging for middle school kids and even algebra kids in high school because they're doing it experientially.
Connect to Scratch. This is a rural elementary school, very small in the mountains. Oops, again, it always wants me to click it twice.
I guess how it started was a few people were asked to make a game for PE class.
Where's my gamers?
We used Scratch Decks and the Kinect.
So I made Donkey Kong, Princess Peach, and Mario, all by myself. But I did use pictures for inspiration, and I give full credit to the actual Donkey Kong.
Change Y. We're gonna need a wait.
One has to no.
We're gonna need a
very short wait. We're just trying to get this to work.
Yeah, we need this to work. I learned also angles, tons of angles.
This is straightforward. If I rotate 90 degrees, that would be this way.
No, yeah, you have to do it. Wait, okay, so you're saying, but if it's on edge and it's upside down, that means it's facing this way, so it has to be turning 90 degrees.
Now, listen to the vocabulary. Listen to what's going on with these kids. This is, so they're creating a game that younger kids can follow in PE, because Connect to Scratch uses the Connect bar to run things. And so we have, you know, this amazing ability to...
No, it doesn't matter.
It would use coordinates for your movement.
There we go. All right. Why am I not in? Okay, hold on.
Next slide.
Next slide. All right.
There we go. So one of the things that we think about, and I was really also influenced by the Innovator's Dilemma a number of years ago, and thinking about the idea that oftentimes what happens is in public schools, probably just in a lot of sectors, that you spend your time on the strategic work and you spend your time on the operational work as a leader. But you don't really think a lot about the invention and innovation work that needs to fuel the next iteration of what you're trying to accomplish. And so one of the things that we really went after is the idea that when we did start to see a plateau, that we would infuse some new energy, new resources into what I call the two buckets of work that leaders do that oftentimes don't get a lot of attention, and that is innovation and invention buckets. Oftentimes, and I believe that educators are some of the most creative people in the world because they are the original DIYers, right? They make everything. But oftentimes that work happens under the radar and you don't surface it up. And when you do, as we did in Albemarle, we found there was creativity everywhere in all of our schools, and we were able to really work on making it go viral. So we take this inspiration from Clayton Christensen's work as an innovator of how do you really look to that next generation of work and make sure that your organization has an innovation bucket and an invention bucket that you're pulling from as you're moving work towards strategic and operational focus.
And one of the things we wanted to do was have people both understand the world as it is becoming and to not be threatened by it. So if the noise in that first video we showed bothers you, so would like the workspaces my millennial son always works in.
And mine
would
too.
Bother you, right, because that's what they sound like. The business world, the military world, and a lot of people talk about living in a VUCA world. It's volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. The theory is that this is what the world has become, but I would argue it's what the world has always been. But right now, especially, we don't understand truly what life will look like in 2050. And we're educating students who will live most of their lives in the second half of the 21st century. So this can be threatening, or we can view it all as an opportunity.
What was that quote that Microsoft views the VUCA world as an existential threat?
Every 3 years,
They have to reinvent themselves every several years. What we tried to really do was to say, that oftentimes when the VUCA world concept gets rolled out there, it feels sometimes as if people take sort of an attitude of, well, what are we going to do? How can we really even, confront this? How could we even take the challenges of this on? And it feels very pessimistic. So what Ira and I've done is we've reconceptualized what we do as being what we like to call the opti world, which is a worldview that comes from optimism, that comes from a place of saying that we as human beings have always taken on challenges and seen challenges as something that we should be looking at through a more positive worldview versus a negative, because every time we take on a challenge and we address it full on, one of the things that comes out of that are really great things that benefit civilization. And so we talk about that in our belief system, that an educational system should come from a position of being an opti worldview, one that believes in openness, that sees the possibilities of the world, not the impossibilities, that's transformative and actually fuels itself through the imagination that's baked into the DNA of human beings.
So we're going to talk about 4 quick stories here, little stories that, sort of suggest what we think we've been constantly trying to build in our schools.
And they're all building stories, but the logic model that I landed on as I kept working with people and figuring out what's making this particular change, this initiative, this new idea, this new focus work. And here's what I really came to the conclusion, that leadership is actually key. And it starts with leaders who can get to yes. And I learned that from a mentor about 30 years ago, because when I had a teacher come to me when I was a young administrator and ask about doing a really crazy idea, and I shared it with my mentor, he said this to me, Pam, if she walks out your door and you've told her no, not only will she never come back to you with a creative idea, she'll tell 10 other people and they'll never come to you either. So one of the things that we've really tried to do is to embed the power of yes at the teacher level, at the building level, administrator level, and even at the superintendent level. The other thing that we know is that when people come to you with ideas of things that they think will increase the efficacy work that we're doing in our schools, that if we just let that one person do that work, it will tend to just kind of become that pocket of excellence. But when that person is pulling in a team around them to work with them, when they engage a team, the likelihood that that idea is going to take root and actually give birth to something that makes a difference increases, we think, exponentially. The third thing as a superintendent, and I lived through the recession era just like everybody else did, had to cut $10 million in 1 year, is that you can't expect people to show up with more money for you to do your innovative ideas. One of the things that we really worked hard at every level of the organization was when we had something that we felt like Team 19 that we think would make a difference, we went out and said, how do we leverage and repurpose the current resources we have to be able to support this up? And if it catches fire, then we'll look at the future of how we will be able to bring resources in behind that. But we can't depend on money that doesn't exist. And that's when people give up and say, well, there's not the money to do it. We said, how do we find the money to do this if that's what we needed? And then lastly, the other thing that we really had a belief system in is prototyping and test bedding ideas, just like startups do. We said, if we have a great idea and we think it's so wonderful that I as superintendent go, okay, everybody in the system is going to do this, the likelihood of failure just goes off the dial. And so one of the things that we would do is we would say, let's test bed this. Let's prototype it, aim small, miss small, and try it out, get the information that would suggest this is an idea that maybe needs to stay in this school. This is an idea that maybe can go out to some other schools. It may scale across an idea to other schools. And then eventually, this is something that's working so well, we want it to become strategic and ultimately operational. And so we use this cycle as a logic model.
An example of, some people will look at that open elementary space and think that costs a lot of money. But in fact, if you build an open space instead of the 6 classrooms we were going to build, you save all the money you were going to spend building a hallway. And with the money we saved from building the hallway, we furnished the space.
So I'm going to tell you a quick story, and I'll make this one short. But the young woman that you see in the front that's got the beautiful braided hair is Iawati. And Iawati had decided when she was a 10th grader she wanted to be an engineer. But she also said, I would have never thought about that when I was in middle school because nobody ever told me that being an engineer was really cool, but she happened to have a really great teacher. She went to that teacher, and I learned this story, I'll tell you about this. She went to that teacher and she had an idea. The idea became reality, and as a superintendent, you watch the news very early every morning, and up pops this story about one of our schools and Iawati's story, and I went, man, I didn't even know about this. I gotta go talk to this young woman. And so I went over and I met with her. Here's what she said to me. I went to my teacher because I felt like that middle school girls needed to have an opportunity to experience engineering. And so I said to him, what I'd like to do is to bring middle school girls in the summertime and do a camp with them around engineering. Here's what she told me. Her teacher said, I think that's a great idea. Yes, let's do it. So see, that yes is not just something that sits in the superintendent's office. It has to live everywhere. She went out, he supported her up. She got lumber from Lowe's. She recruited some friends. They put together a bridge building camp for the summer. They did advertising out to the middle schools, brought in girls, and ran a bridge building camp that ended up building this bridge out in the woods along a river that has a nature trail along it so that people who could not get access, particularly people in wheelchairs, would be able to get over a little tributary and stay on the nature trail. When I interviewed her, I said, so Iawati, what did you learn from doing this? She said, number one, that the girls did find that engineering is a lot of fun. But number two, when you give something to your community, there's more than just the engineering camp that they got out of it. They also got out of it a sense of that we've done something for our community that's really reinforcing of who we are, that empathy piece. She also set this up so that it would not die with her. She's now in college. But this camp has continued, and they've continued to every year, a new crop of girls take it on, run it, lead it, and build bridges out in our community with middle school girls. Ira?
So bridge building, and then, which leads to empathy. And August 12th, 2017 was a moment when Charlottesville, which we surround, became a hashtag. When your community becomes a hashtag, we had the Unite the Right riot with the Klan and neo-Nazis. And this all occurred the weekend before all our teachers were coming back to start the year. What's important to us is that I think we had built in the tools for students to be a huge part of this community conversation. We had developed, in this one particular high school, a theater program that students did virtually everything. Wrote the plays, directed the plays, choreographed the plays, directed the pit orchestras if it was musical, etc. Did all the moves, and it was a theater program whose demographics looked exactly like the demographics of the school, which is a rural high school that touches the edge of the urban area. And
so this young guy, Josh St. Steele, wrote a play called A King's Story. And it started out as something that was going to look at police violence with African American youth. When August 12th happened, he evolved it to also reflect what had happened in Charlottesville. So it's a one-act play. They're getting ready to perform it, and it gets advertised up on Facebook because that's what our kids do. And I start getting pressure from people that don't want this to be performed. So I'm sitting with the cabinet, and there's this conversation about, well, Pam, are you going to let this thing get performed? You know, it's on the news and the radio and the talk show. Conservatives are really stirring this thing up. And I looked at the group and I said, you know, we tell our young people, your voice matters, your agency is critical, and if you don't have influence in your school, your community, and the world, we aren't doing our jobs as educators. We're going to let this play go on. It did. That play moved from the school stage to our local live arts theater to the University of Virginia's Culber Theater. It then was picked up from a keynote that I did down in New Jersey, and the kid was invited to go to New York to be in a TED-like talk experience, and he came back and tell a story. He came back and he said, Ms. Moran, I was on the biggest stage I've ever been on in my life. But one of the things that's happened is this kid got turned on. He got into a playwright camp this past summer. He's going to go to college and probably do really wonderful things. Maybe he'll be the next Miranda, I don't know. But the reality is that's the story of how we engage teams and how kids come to see that their influence does matter. All right, Ira, next one.
this is, one of my favorite stories. So you take a rural middle school that struggles with identity because it brings together populations from 4 elementaries that traditionally were incredibly divided communities, racially segregated, going back centuries, and the difference between suburban, edge suburban, and kids from the mountains. And how do you pull this all together? Well, we met a gentleman named Alex Gilliam, works in Philadelphia with a project called Public Workshop, where he works with kids on iterative building projects. You don't draw plans, you just keep working on it until you get where you want to go.
Yeah.
And this is, so we invited him down, we got a small grant to cover him coming down. Luckily, his parents lived in Charlottesville, so we didn't have to pay for most of the things. But, so we're going into, we're about 3 weeks before our state testing window, which in Virginia is called SOLs, because you got to be truthful about what you're doing to kids. And this is a school that always struggled to get accredited, but
Standards of learning.
But the kids said, 1970s middle school, horrible place, half the classrooms didn't have windows, the cafeteria had no windows. They said, we want to change our dining experience.
Yeah, and so I'm watching Instagram one night, and we have this, a lot of our schools feed up, communicate about what they're doing. And I see this. Now, I knew this project was going on. I have in my head, these kids are going to build dining booths and maybe put a couple posters up on the wall and, maybe bring some plants in, and wouldn't that be nice? And what I see is these, I don't know, I like to think they're 12 feet, I don't know. Tree houses going up. So I called down there. They're all down there working with the kids on this. I called down there, and here's what I'm told. Well, Pam, the kids didn't want to build booths. They wanted to build tree houses. And by the way, they roll. My next call was to the lawyer to find out what the status of this might be. I go down there, though, and I walk in, and there's power tools buzzing, and there's kids coming. All the classes at school eventually worked on this. I walk in, and what I see are kids working on this. And the principal says, "You see the kid in the blue shirt right here?" She said, "That kid lives in my office. He barely keeps himself in this school, but he's become a leader of this project." And a math teacher said, "You know, the kids, we're getting ready to take these SOL tests, and I've got kids that are figuring out fractions for the first time because they're doing this project work." And so one of the things that we really realized is that when you take a risk, you got to be able to leverage those resources together. You got to get that team. You got to get to yes, but you also have to be willing to jump off that cliff and take the risk to let kids do this kind of work. Because if you don't, you'll never get to see what's possible. Everything will look impossible. All right, let's roll. All right, and we're going to let this young woman tell you the story of what we consider the fourth theme of building in our system. So we feel like we've built bridges with our community. We feel like that we have certainly built empathy across a community that's been really challenged with that. We've built risk-taking, but we've also built passion.
So how do you rethink a high school from what we call zero-based thinking? That is, if you'd never seen a high school, what would you do? And what we came up with was this would be passion-based high school. Students come in and say, "This is what I want to do," and we'd figure out how to get the curriculum and the curriculum and the credits to them.
My name is Mia. I'm a student at Albemarle Tech, and this is my project.
We're almost there.
My project is a piece of a series. It's going to be based off of being trapped. So it's a dress of cards. I call it my house of cards. The cards are there for, like, when you shuffle cards, they always change. When you build a house of cards, you can blow it over. It's very easy to change. It's easy to mess up, knock over. And then the dress represents more of like a sort of, I suppose, feminism side of it, where women get trapped in the roles that they didn't even choose. With the corset part, it's tied up in the back with wire, laced like a corset kind of. And that it again ties into more of like the feminist side of it, I suppose, with like women had to wear corsets when they're in older ages, and it's like the constricting lifestyle, and like the limits that are put on people, not just women, to be what society wants them to be and not what they wish to be. I started working on this in my bedroom.
So the key thing that she talks about is having the time and space to work on what matters to her. So you take a high school and you eliminate the bell schedule. We said no classes, no classrooms. We created studios with specialty tools, and we everything from virtual reality to wood shop things. One kid built a guitar, a banjo, and a violin this fall. Others did amazing writing in virtual reality, which is a stunning way to write. And we've opened up opportunities. What the students say all the time is we've given them the gift of time. People say, is the trick to engagement having it be fun all the time? It's not fun all the time. It's not fun for her to assemble that dress or to do all the woodwork to build a guitar. But you'll pursue things in an intense way and pursue the knowledge you need if the end is where you want to get to.
So we would just say back to that logic model, that there are some things that we've discovered within that. Ira, I don't know what we're doing here.
Sorry.
Oops, you're trying to control it. Wait a second. You've
Yeah.
got the clicker again.
Okay, that's right.
I don't know why he thinks that you should have the clicker. Did you watch this girl? Did you hear her? What she had to say?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's right, yeah.
The clicker. So anyway, we went through that logic model. That's a very clear pathway that we repeat over and over again as leaders. But beyond that, we also believe that there are 10 paths to how we have supported risk. The first is obviously getting to yes. The other is asking great questions. You don't just have people come in with ideas and go yes, and then just let them go off. You got to ask some questions. And we say questions should always have why. The other thing is that test bed, aiming small, missing small, that we don't want to repeat the failures of big school divisions that roll out iPads to everybody, and then the project fails, and it fails badly and superintendents lose their job. What we want is to test bed. We also believe that you have to provide spaces for young people and teachers to be able to support everybody as a learner. We have to provide choices because not every kid is going to like to work in a particular environment. So really creating many different environments we think is key. Making the learning active. And I think that, Ira, the developing talent and making innovation systemic, you're going to take us through one project we did that moved technology very differently into the system.
I will say that the picture you're looking at is a rising kindergartner. He's almost 5. He's at our summer coder dojo, which is K through 12 sort of coding camp that we do. We were in Ireland, in County Tipperary, and saw Coder Dojo, which is mostly peer-to-peer taught.
All over the country.
All over the country of Ireland, all over the island of Ireland. And we were so impressed by watching, I remember watching a 7-year-old working with all these high school students on coding problem and thinking this is amazing. So we brought it back. And we did it a little differently. They tend to do it on weekends. We did it as a week-long summer thing for students. We could get in a couple of weeks, about 700, 800 students in it.
And again, we moved this I think we were the first public system in America to have
do
this.
It, yes.
And then it started to spread in the United States too.
What's amazing is even if it's a very young child, this young man is showing me his lightning detector, which of course it isn't at all. It's things found in a parts box. But his vocabulary in an hour had perhaps doubled. So we brought it back and we iterated it different ways. We wanted to make sure it wasn't just for middle class kids. We bussed summer school kids in, we bussed multilingual kids, English language learners in. We brought it home in a significant way. Of course, it's free for everyone. Our tech staff worked their tails off making this happen every summer.
Ira.
But it became something very transformative. What eventually it became is our professional learning opportunity in multi-age project-based learning. So what we did was we started saying to teachers, if you come, we'll pay you a little bit for the week you spend with us, if you'll come and work with us and think about how this can impact your teaching. Cheryl, who's the teacher in the middle of the room there, for example, was one of our master teachers. Cheryl's a middle school language arts teacher, and she converted learning to code Scratch games into the writing process. So you had characters and conflict and journey and all of that. It was really quite remarkable.
I just read that there is a new code that's rolled out that you actually write it in
the blocks, yes.
Yeah, so it's kind of fascinating.
But, we tried to do this then with everything, build on these things we had learned. So the aim small, miss small. When we started with virtual reality, I started with 5 rigs. I put them spread them out in certain schools and asked the kids to tell us what they could do with them. The young woman here she's designing a dress. But our Asperger's kids used it in phenomenal ways. Our writers did, our theater programs, it changes. Whenever we could change a space, we spent money on it. This is part of a middle school science lab, or what we call a learning lab now. You let kids, here's one of our rules. Every child should be able to walk into a classroom and decide where, how, or if to sit, just as if they walked into your living room.
Or your office.
Or your office.
And one of the things that I will say, and I want to capture this, I think, Ira, while you're in this mix, and that is that when we started with the virtual reality pieces, and everybody, is putting on the goggles and you're watching, yourself go on roller coasters and so forth. Every time we introduce a new technology, the question we ask is, what can kids make with this? What can kids make with this? Not that they're replicating what somebody else has done or just experiencing what someone else has created, but how do our kids become embedded creators in every aspect of technology we bring in?
So, for example, a group of our middle schoolers made the first ever virtual reality tour of Thomas Jefferson's Monticello. We had another group of middle schoolers do a virtual reality film about the Rosenwald schools, the original black schoolhouses built in the South. Elementary kids you saw at the beginning were doing the same with their bird studies. So we go after a systemic idea of innovation where all of this, the getting to yes, the engaging teams, the leveraging resources builds together so people know that when they have an idea, they can pursue it. And we're going to move sort of quickly through here, but four things.
Yeah, and the thing that I think about in this next group of slides is what are the kinds of things we're working on in the ways that kids learn. And we really have borrowed, whether it's from the World Economic Forum or from the Chamber of Commerce in Virginia or our local business employers, from communities, from people in colleges and universities. One of the things we find is pretty much if you start to stack up what people think kids need in order to be successful in work, in their homes, in their communities as citizens, it's really about how do kids become successful for life. And so these are the kinds of things we started working on. We started working on people skills. How do our kids learn the capability to work together, to understand where other people are from, to really focus on both collaboration that really elevates that diversity is a good thing in a community and in a school, so that we really focus that way. We also focused on technical skills.
Technical skills. How do you use tools? And tools are everything. I always love the definition of technology as the art of manipulating your world.
And when we started seeing kids that are taking AP classes landing in our Career Tech Center classes and saying this is a good place to be, we knew that we were starting to break down barriers.
He's 8. He's really good on this saw.
Yeah, it's a chop saw. How many people have used the chop saw? Got a few in the room, thanks. So I walk up to this kid and I say, don't you think you should have an adult kind of close to you? He said, I don't know why, I'm the expert around here.
This was at a pop-up summer makerspace that we moved into.
A firehouse.
A firehouse, yeah. At knowledge skills, it's not a question of, there's a difference of memorizing facts and knowing how to work with information. And that's what we find most important. We'll get kids to pass the test so we stay out of trouble, but that's not our goal.
And looking at literacy in a more interdisciplinary way, 30 years ago, I would have said, if somebody said to me, what's literacy, Pam, when I was an elementary principal, I would have said reading and writing. Today, it is a multidisciplinary focus.
And disposition skills. How do kids learn intrinsic motivation and what drives them through life? Just as we sort of close out, just a couple of images and our tiny house that one of our high schools built. This is a 5th grader running drone lessons.
So we actually went over in this school, the teacher said, hey, we're not buying supplies this year, we want a drone for our classes, 3rd through 5th grade multi-age. And I said, so how are they learning to use them? And he said, well, I picked out these 2 kids and said, hey, you guys are going to be the drone pilot teachers, build the curriculum, get people enrolled in your classes, and let me know how it's going. And truly, these kids had this little handwritten sign up on the wall that had spaces for kids to sign up in order to take their drone classes. So that's the kind of things that you do when you let creativity run wild.
And here to sort of end, because we want time for you to ask questions and to talk to us. I could challenge Pam with things, with crazy ideas, but when somebody comes to me and says, I need you to buy 20,000 bees for the high school, and I say, what could possibly go wrong with that? And they say, it's okay, they're calm Italian bees. then, okay? But completely transformed earth science. Completely transformed. These kids handed jars of their honey their bees had made to the school board after a year. It was just a radical idea. I think we won't have time for this, so this is a young man who talks about learning to build a robot car. We'll make these slides available to
Somebody
people.
asked about that, and so Eileen, we'll definitely make sure you guys get the slides.
And, you know, what he talks about is who he's learning from is not the teacher, but the other kids who know slightly more than he does, what we call aspirational peers. So we usually want to end with this, you know, because this is how long the argument over progressive education has been going on. This is 1832. And he's a Massachusetts teacher who wrote most of the education books in the 1830s, 1840s. He brought the blackboard to the classroom and wrote a book about how to use it. But this is always true. And one of our drives was, it's the kids. So I'll let you finish.
So I did add this slide. Ira always likes to end on that slide. I said, let's add another one. But it struck me that as we were thinking about the work that we've done, both in terms of the logical path to how you build out innovation, so that it doesn't occur by chance, but it is something that occurs because you are making it a priority, that it struck me that I went back to the story of Edison, and you know, there's a lot of quotes by Edison, and some of them are actually real and some of them aren't, but this is real information about him, that he and his team, and he was not alone, he had a team of associates that worked with him. In the 1800s, and I guess about 1872, something like that, he started working on how to get to this light bulb. And he wasn't the first person to invent a light bulb, but he was the first to invent the commercial that would actually last for some period of time. He and his team tested out 3,000 theories of what they thought would lead to that light bulb. Now, some people in this room are science folks, and you know this story. That was my background, was science education. The next thing they did was when they finally landed on this is what we're going to use as our theory of action to build a light bulb, they then had to test, and he estimates around 6,000 different plant fibers before he landed on the cotton thread as the one that was the one that would have some longevity to it. But what I really love is this quote that comes from Edison, because I think that it defines the work that we've done in Albemarle County along with a lot of other amazing educators. And that is that every time you think you're at the end and you've done everything that's possible, to remember that you haven't. And it doesn't really sit on the shoulders of any one school division or district in this country, or any one entrepreneur, or any one private or public sector nonprofit that's trying to help us get to yes, to a place that really all of our kids, equity and access for every kid to get these kinds of experiences. It rests on all of us together, and we have in no way, shape, or form exhausted all the possibilities of what can be for young people. So that's my challenge to you, is when you leave this conference, take something from yesterday or today or tomorrow and go back and do something with it to push the possibilities in whatever work you're doing, because that's how we will build the educational system that all of our kids deserve and that they also want. So thank you very much, and now we'll take a few questions.
Pretty good for us. This slightly over time is really good.
Good morning.
Hi, Andy.
Good morning. Thank you so much for your inspiring talk. I'm Helen Wang. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Six Crickets. My question is, from the conception of your ideas of the innovation, we're going to lay out this test bed and the space, and you will need to train the teacher, figure out the curriculum, and then to the implementation. How long is this cycle for you?
It could be radically different. It could be as short as a week. We're going to do this, you know. The curriculum is the curriculum, you know, kind of thing. That's not ours to change. It's state curriculum. But how we do it and stuff, it depends. Is the teacher ready? You know, then we can move very quickly. On the other hand, with the multi-age spaces, we spent a year with the teachers first to get them used to this idea of mostly of team teaching and not speaking to a large audience.
So we've had projects like Team 19. We started that in May. We implemented it by August and had it up and running. Then the other schools, because we have four high schools, 3 comprehensive and a charter high school, said, hey, we need to start looking at what's happening there because we may need to. And so they started coming and looking. And one of the things that we'll say is before you decide you're ready to jump, you've got to put in a good planning block to make sure, because you may not do it exactly like this high school did it, or this middle school did it, or this elementary school did it. Responsive classroom is one that we adopted because it's a strong SEL research-based program. We adopted it with 2 schools around 2007. It took us 3 years before all of our 16 elementary schools said, this is working so well with young people to build some SEL competency and reduce some of the issues we're having with things that sometimes challenge even elementary schools. That took about 3 years to go from the beginning to all of the schools in implementation mode. So we always try to look at how quickly can we move something so that if we think it's a good idea, you have to just follow the medical world, that when you have a medication that's in trial and they discover that it's working, they don't keep trying it for another 10 years. They get it out there. That was one of our goals, is if we've tried something and it's working for kids, how do we move it as quickly as possible? Because kids get 1 year at a time with us as educators. And we want to make it that they get what they need.
Thank you. That's awesome.
Hi, Andy.
Morning.
Keep running into you like
Thanks.
this. Yes,
Oh, okay.
Hey, over there.
Good morning. Marlon Davis, Validated Learning.
Hi, Marlon.
Hi, good morning. Former turnaround principal, so I have some experience with responsive classroom and other types of innovative programs.
Yes.
My question is twofold. One, how do you make sure that whoever purchases the software or purchases the program maximizes the value and actually gets the results that the program states that it's going to deliver? Yeah. And secondly, in this environment, which is very, it's interesting and it's sort of invigorating for students, but I'm more of a traditionalist in the sense that we got to get the 3 R's still. We got to be able to read, we got to be able to write, we got to be able to put it on paper. So how do you assess to make sure that students are also being able to be cogent readers, writers, speakers, and communicators for beyond this experience?
Well, if I can just, and this is one of the pushes I really bring to the education world, is yes, there are certain competencies the state sort of demands, and we can get there with things. And what we find is, for instance, kids will only read if they're interested in what they're reading. I started in special education. I found lots of people from the whole fluency craze who could read really fast and had no idea what they read. And I've seen all sorts of failures of that. One of the things we tried to do, though, in our understanding of students was to redefine things like reading and writing. If you're watching a video and you can comprehend it, if you're listening to an audiobook and you can comprehend it, we can help you with the comprehension, you're there. The mechanics, we can get you past the test, although we fought our wars with the state of Virginia to let our kids use many different technologies on the test. But we really shifted to what are the actual skills people need at this point in time. And I just, point to myself. I have read on paper 3 books in my whole life. And so, but, we have the traditional assessments. We have to get there.
Yeah, we have to do that. The thing that I would say to you is that, we've really had a goal that we are more concerned about kids learning for life and less about learning to pass tests. And we know that this is a country that's been totally immersed in test prep curriculum. So when I have a kid say to me that they're walking across the stage not because of remediation, but because of a music studio that gave them the passion to come back to school every day, what we're trying to do is to multi-path what you're talking about, which is, you got to be able to do the requirements of the competencies to get out of high school. Our high school graduation rate has gone up. Our on-time graduation rate has gone up. And it's gone up across multiple demographics in our system.
7% graduation rate. So
and our dropout rate has gone significantly down. And the reason that we think that that's true is because we are getting more kids who are willing to come back to school and invest in the learning because of the kind of learning that they're able to do. And yeah, you'll still find kids that are sitting in, in desk and they're doing direct instruction because that's part of a continuum of ways that kids need to learn. But at the same time, if you leave out engagement as a factor in kids doing well in school, and I think that's one of the biggest problems we have in this country right now is we have left engagement off the list of to-dos for us as educators in our urge to take away everything we can from kids to get them to pass tests.
I'll repeat again that
may not be what you wanted to hear, Marvin.
That multi-age space
I'll follow up after.
was one of our testing triumphs.
Pam and Ira, hi, thank you for that great presentation. Andy Calkins from Next Gen Learning Challenges. What I loved about it was that you have found a way to place a higher value on the benefits that come from all of this risk-taking than the value that we as a society tend to place on mitigating all forms of risk. I mean, I don't know if your lawyers have ever seen the picture of the 8-year-old with that huge saw.
Yes.
But I mean, there must have been moments when these people were like yelling at you, and when, as occasionally is going to happen, something bad happens and there's a victim. How do you build a culture that is strong enough to withstand that moment?
Well, one of the things that I learned from our lawyer is the concept of mitigated risks. So when we built the treehouse and I called him, I said, so John, I don't know what to do about this. Is there a way that we can let this happen? And he said, yeah, you got to get it inspected. You got to make sure if there are any challenges that the inspectors put out there, that you address those, and that you have good training in the school for using this, and that it's supervised, in terms of there being adults around that kind of keep an eye on kids. But what you have to be able to do, and I do believe that, there are a lot of people, well, there's not a lot of people in the room with white hair, there's a few. We remember generations ago when kids got to do a lot more than they do today because we live in a society that is both, based in litigation, but also parents that are based in fear that something terrible is going to happen to their kids. And I just read an amazing quote recently that said that it was the wandering around in the neighborhood and doing things like building tree houses in the woods with non-parent play, supervised play, that built me into a person that can do the job I do today in my adult life. I think there are a lot of folks that have forgotten what it's like to have children have freedom and opportunity to work with things like tools. There were adults near that kid, they just weren't standing over him.
I know we're running out of time, but I always say to people, if the only place your kids have freedom from your adult supervision is online, they will be online all the time.
Yeah.
We're really sorry we have to cut off the questions. I don't know what to say about how much fun we've had listening to you.
Let me just tell you one last quote on that whole screen thing. Ira says, if you're concerned about how much time your kids are spending on screens, send them to a mud puddle.
What a wonderful story, and what wonderful storytellers. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And I now have a new title for my own personal philosophy of Opti World. I just can't thank you enough.